Okay, so what am I doing here? If you've missed any of the announcements, I want to let you know like what I'm doing, why I'm doing this live. So good to see you guys. Happy New Year. So I don't know about all of you, but for me, the new year is always challenging. The winter time is always challenging to feel creative, to feel inspired, especially after all the holidays and like the busyness of all of that we typically have, most of us have going on in our lives. And I also know, for a lot of us, we've maybe even gone through some really big changes or big life changes. A lot of times during the winter time can be just challenging anyway. So I personally have been struggling since I got back to the United States in January to really um, feel this sense of, curiosity and joy and desire to create. So what I wanted to do for myself and also, share with all of you is a challenge for February. So I am doing a February challenge Monday through Friday, every morning, 10 a.m., right, 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on my Facebook page live. This is all about, painting whatever I feel inspired to paint. And of course, in turn, sharing that with all of you. So you can either just enjoy these, get inspiration from these demonstrations that I'm going to do and talks. But I will be painting, every morning throughout the month of February at 10 a.m. Eastern right here on my page. So make sure that you like my Facebook page and hit the notification bell so that you get notified whenever these new demonstrations are coming on. So you're welcome to paint along with these. I will do my best to share the reference image with you as well if you're needing the reference image. Or you can just set up something on your own. Feel free to post, in the comments on this video, anything that, you create, your paintings, if your thoughts, your questions. I will be checking time to time to answer any questions. But also this is going to be for me for the month of February. It's also, I'm really going to be looking to paint things that inspire me, that I feel just curious about or feel, pulled to create. And so that's probably going to vary some from day to day. I'm not really sure where it's going to go. And that is the nature of curiosity and creativity. Good morning, Maria. Hi, Pauline. Hello, Julia. So good to see everybody here. So now, the first thing I would say is if you're really feeling like you have zero curiosity, zero creativity right now, it also could be that you're just exhausted, that you're just tired. Maybe you've gone through a really stressful time in your life, like I have recently with this big move and big transition back to the US. And, it's a good idea to, first of all, just reestablish that rest, get rested up, take care of yourself physically, get good sleep, maybe don't force yourself to do anything too dramatic. I know a lot of times, hi, Gail, a lot of times first of the year in January, it's like, what are your New Year's resolutions? Goals, goals, goals. And kind of this like hardcore drive about that. And we see, and I'm very much of that overachiever breed. And what I have learned is that hitting it really hard and fast first of the year really typically doesn't work for me, even as a high achiever. And somebody who likes to, set goals. I love setting goals. I love structuring my time. I love really pushing for things, right? I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And I also believe that there's a time and a place for everything. And right now, for me, it's a time and a season to honor the winter, honor this kind of quiet, restful kind of hibernation mode, this receptive mode, in space, a mode of spaciousness, and really just allowing kind of listening and waiting for, that intuition and that inspiration, and also just the time to kind of express gratitude. I'm also doing this because I don't know if you guys are feeling this as well, but of course, with all of the news and everything out there seems to be just like wanting to grab our attention, right? And really, for me, part of creativity is like taking back power and control of my own internal world, right? My internal, taking care of my heart. And our creativity really soothes that anxiousness. So I'm also going to invite all of you to consider, doing this with me, going on a diet of the news and all of the headlines and all of the, negativity and all of the like fear that's going on right now. Because all that's going to do is like decrease our desire to create, and it's going to increase our anxiety. Martha Beck has a great book that I recommend, by the way, called Beyond Anxiety. And really, most of the book is about creativity and how living in our right brain, living more in our right brain activity actually soothes that sense of anxiousness and anxiety and depression, and, all of those things. So, all right. So, that is, what I'm up to this month, and I'm going to just be sharing it, with all of you. Something else that shuts down our creativity is pressure. So pressure to perform, pressure to have it be something in particular, pressure to be good at what we do, all of those things. Let me get set up here. And so, it's a good idea before you start to create to just kind of take a deep breath and, release the pressure. Pull some pressure off of yourself. Allow yourself to let go. Trust, that whatever happens at the easel today is perfect. It's perfect for where we're at, where you're at. It's perfect for where I'm at today. And whenever I take my attention off of, kind of wanting some sense of control or some sense of, the control over the outcome, like, oh, will this painting be good? Will I do a good job today? Will I say the right things as I'm doing this live? Will I explain things well? Stuff like that. It's like, just relax and let it go. And even if you're not, a painting instructor, sometimes we can just bring a lot of baggage of pressure, lots of load of pressure to the easel with us. And that is really just going to kill our creativity. So you want to really show up almost like a little child in a way, like you're showing up to just kind of play today and see where this goes. You don't see little kids whenever they are doing their coloring book and they're making it, they're totally outside the lines and I don't have any brushes, so I better get some brushes. You don't see them, like judging their coloring book drawings, right? or their drawings. You don't see them going, oh, that's not very good. Now, once they get older, that will, they'll start to learn those behaviors from, watching the adults in their life, maybe criticizing themselves, or maybe a friend at school or a teacher kind of tells them that, that what they did isn't right or isn't very good. And so, for most of us, as we get older, we learn these behaviors of, is it right or wrong? Is it good or bad? Did we do good enough? How do we measure up to other artists, other people, other wives, other mothers? We learn, unfortunately, this skill set of comparing ourselves to other people and kind of judging ourselves and sizing ourselves up. So it's a lot to feel like, it maybe feels a little heavy to try to release that. But one of the beautiful things about creativity is that if you just can let go and be in the present moment, it naturally will release. You don't really have to try to release it. And then if you catch yourself, kind of going back into that editor, critic mind while you're painting, just try to catch yourself and bring yourself back into the present moment. Find something that you can enjoy about what you're painting, whether it is the color of a rose, maybe it's just the feeling of the paint on the brush. If you're listening to music while you're painting, find something that you can connect to whenever you catch yourself going, oh, dang, I messed that up, And you can also just, I find humor is such a great way as well. Not self-deprecating humor, but just, being lighthearted, I guess I would say. When things maybe do happen that you don't like in your painting, and instead of saying like, oh, I messed that up, you might just kind of laugh it off and go, whoopsie, well, I didn't mean for that to happen. So this critical left brain, logical mind shuts down the right brain mind and shuts down that kind of freedom of creativity. So in the freedom is actually this kind of open, actually where the open space is for new information to come in. All right, so I bought these beautiful pink roses, a whole bouquet of these pink roses last week, and I painted a large bouquet of them for one of my lessons for my Art Life School members for upcoming in February for Valentine's Day. And I still have a bunch of them here, and they're so cute and so pretty. So I decided today that I wanted to do something smaller. So this is on a 6x6, and I'm just starting this off with some burnt umber here and some of my medium. If you're new to me, the medium I prefer is liquid light gel, which helps speed the drying of the paint with oil paint so that the paint does dry a little bit faster. Not quite as fast as acrylics or even alkyds, but this will be mostly dry by tomorrow. And I like that for painting wet into wet, especially if I'm going to be working on the painting, trying to get the painting to more of a finish look within, an hour, a couple of hours, even upwards of, 4 or 6 hours. The paint is still wet and workable, but it starts to set up. So I can start to build more layers wet into wet without, getting mud, build, things like broken color and just have more control over the oil paint. Because as we know, oil, it's so luscious and oily and beautiful, but it also is very, very, oily and buttery. And so whenever it's fresh out of the tube, it can feel a little bit, it can just be challenging to get some controlled results. So I've learned over the years that I'm not going to be able to get a ton of control right off the bat with the paint. I kind of have to let the paint do what it wants to do in the beginning. But then with the speed drying medium towards the end of the painting, I have a little more control because that paint starts to dry. So right now I'm just kind of blocking in some shadow shapes. I'm getting in my size and placement. I just was plotting out where are the side planes of this cute little antique or vintage green ginger jar. And we have a cast shadow here where this rose is. You might be wondering, why are you not drawing the roses yet? That's the main thing. And I don't really like to draw anything in terms of like the contours and things like that. I don't like to fill in the lines, so to speak. So I just try to establish like what's the overall shape. Like here, I like to go side to side to get my mass of my shape, just with a little bit of that burnt umber, just so I can see it against the tone of the background. So this is the first stage, which I always call the start. And in this stage one, there's only 3 stages to the painting. Stage one is the start, and that includes your size and placement. Where are you going to place your objects on the canvas? Okay, it includes building your shadows, because without shadow, you cannot have light. Keep that in mind with today's, with our all the news and everything going on right now. You know, we have to have contrast in the world. We have, you know, light and shadow, dark and light. The two cannot exist without one another. So same thing is true in painting. In oils, we typically work dark to light in oil paint versus watercolor, which, you know, you tend to work light to dark in watercolor. So this is stage one, size and placement, shadow shapes, and then background color is also part of stage one. So once I lay in my background color, it's really the background color that's going to make the roses appear, you know, out of basically nothingness. All right. So I think I'm going to do, and also let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll try to scan back through and see. Dinah, you notice me using my left hand. Maybe that is me being more more connected to my right brain these days over the left brain. Good morning, Lynn. It's so good to see you here. Hello, Gary. All right. Oh, yeah. It's okay. Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah, they've changed something. I couldn't get this to flip correctly. So I'm going to have to research that today and see where that setting went on the Facebook Live videos. They've done something different there. Oops, I don't know what I did now. Everything is different for some reason. Okay, but we'll get that figured out. So, you know, you can really go I can go a number of different ways with this background color. I know that I want it to be, since my foreground is pink and green, it can be a color that is related to one of those colors, but it can't be as saturated as these colors in the foreground. So I don't want to do like a super saturated green or like a saturated, you know, that were the same color pink, basically. You can go a couple of different routes here. You can go to just a neutral. So you can use something like you know, something in the gray family, like burnt umber and phthalo blue will kind of cancel each other out. And you can go just kind of for a neutral gray like this. That's one option. Okay. You can also do something that would be harmonious, would be like a really deep, rich red. So something like, you know, black and alizarin crimson, maybe some burnt umber and cab red light for kind of a rich, deep red. That would also be really nice with the color of the roses as well. You could do something like that. I'm going to go more for the neutral gray, but this gray right here is kind of a cool gray. And since my colors in the foreground, I've got this very cool kind of phthalo green and then this cool kind of baby pink. I'm going to go for a warmer gray though. So that means, you know, this gray right here just kind of has a little more blue in it. And I want to just warm it up. Actually, I need some of these colors to be freshened up a bit here. They dried out over the weekend. So let's see. I really just wanted the burnt sienna to warm up this gray mixture. Burnt sienna. But with background color, the thing to keep in mind is you want it to accentuate your foreground. So I'm going to add in some burnt sienna just to kind of warm up this cooler gray here, and some yellow ochre. So I just kind of get this nice warm, you know, gray, and that's okay. I can just kind of blend this in. Your background also doesn't have to be the exact same color all the way across, so don't worry about that. Typically, you don't want it to be the same value. You do want it to change here and there in value. You just don't want it to change so abruptly that your background starts getting attention. So you can see here where I'm just kind of carving around where the light of that rose is going to be. Okay, and this is going to be kind of my darker value of this warm gray. And then I can also take my paper towel and just lift any of that paint for like the lit edge of that little rosebud there, that little pink rosebud. And so since this is reversed today from what I'm actually, from the way it actually is, then I will definitely post a reference photo in the comments on my Facebook video for you. And don't worry too much about these brush strokes. I am using a hog hair bristle brush. These are my favorite brushes by Silver Grand Prix. These are filberts. Right now I'm using a number 4 brush, and hog hair brushes hold a lot of paint, and they also put down a lot of paint. So especially whenever you're painting on a panel like this, you're going to see some of those brush marks right now. If you don't like those by the end of the painting, you can always soften them out with a soft hair brush. But for now, I'm not going to worry about them. I'm not going to let them trouble me. You know, if they're catching too much glare, then you can kind of tilt if you have an easel or something that you can kind of tilt forward, that will cut the glare for now. And now I'm not seeing any comments. Well, hopefully I'll get this figured out by tomorrow, whatever the changes are they've made here. You never know when they're going to make changes like that, unfortunately. Okay. So we'll just paint today, and I hope that you get whatever it is that you need today out of this. Well, and on that note, like, you will get whatever you're looking for. I do want to bring that up. So if we think about, I don't know if you guys remember Winnie the Pooh, but do you remember, you know, the characters on Winnie the Pooh and how different sometimes their version of reality was even from one another. So somebody like Eeyore, right? For example, the character like Eeyore might, everything that, even whenever he experiences good things, he's still got that Eeyore-ish mentality, right? Like he still is like, oh, it's not that great, you know? So just keep that in mind too. Whatever you are looking for in life, whatever your perspective is, that's what you will get, has been my experience. So also, if you're finding yourself maybe getting into a negative place with your painting, take some time to try to, see if you can understand what that is and bring a lot of loving kindness to yourself in your painting time whenever you're, feeling maybe kind of down on yourself artistically, or maybe a little sad or mopey. Take some time to try to understand what that's all about, and then realize that, it's up to all of us to shift that in ourselves. All right, I'm going to start with the green, and I'm using phthalo blue today for that beautiful emerald green ginger jar, and some cadmium lemon, and a little bit of cad yellow deep. And again, the more you can just be in the moment, like right now, I'm just really loving this color. What a gorgeous color this is. I love this color of green. Same thing whenever you're trying to decide, what to paint. Just pay attention to what you are finding beautiful. What's really going to light you up. And it's going to be different from day to day, perhaps. And everybody kind of has different things that they enjoy, and that really lights them up. One artist might really respond to color. Another artist just might only be interested in light or atmosphere or the composition of something. Everything I love about painting is just really actually how simple it can be once you understand it. In the beginning, it feels so overwhelming and frustrating. But once you really learn about it, which obviously takes a lot of time and patience to learn about it, but once you do really learn about it, it's like, oh, wow, I really love the simplicity of this. So I'm just kind of filling in that color, and then I went a little bit darker with some more phthalo there for the side plane, the shadow plane. And then these cast shadows. So I'm just starting with simple shapes right now, and just trying to deposit enough color down. Now, this is another kind of brush here that's really a nice brush from same company, Silver Brush. If you don't like those hog hair bristles, this is a really beautiful brush, Silver Monza, M-O-N-Z-A. And it's kind of like a soft mongoose type of brush. Just keep in mind that if you're wanting to be super juicy in your paint quality or get more painterly, a brush like this may not be the best option, because it's going to be kind of hard to build paint quality with it. But if you really love that kind of smooth, refined look in your paint, this might be the best brush for you. They also have another brush, I can't think of the name of it right now, but is kind of in between these two brushes. So these two brushes are kind of extremes. Or the Ruby Satin is also a soft hair brush, which I really love. And I typically use this to kind of soften out some of those glare of my brush strokes towards the end of the painting. Okay, so we're basically done here with the start, phase one. I'm going to put down a little more burnt umber, because I think what I'm going to do here is go with the reflections on the tabletop. So I'm going to use some of my medium, and maybe I'll warm that up a bit with some of that reddish tone. Maybe I will use a little bit of that reddish tone that I mixed up earlier, just to get a nice deep, almost like a cherry wood type of shell for tabletop here. And you might notice that I'm using horizontal strokes on the tabletop, and that is because it's a horizontal plane. So a lot of times in the background, I'll use vertical strokes to get the paint going, and then horizontal strokes on the flat horizontal plane. And then I'm going to go a little bit darker. Since I took that tabletop darker, I need to go darker with some black and alizarin for cast shadow on that dark cherry wood tabletop. So your cast shadow value and color is going to be related to the value and color of the object that the cast shadow is on. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Basically, you just want to go for, in this case, a darker and warmer version of the tabletop color. And right now I'm just leaving this kind of burnt umber here for where the glaze ends and that stone begins. Now I'm going to lift, you can use your brush two ways, wet into wet. You can use it to put paint down, or you can use it to lift paint. So I'm actually kind of dragging through the paint to actually remove some of that paint and then wipe my brush. Okay. All right. Now moving into, I've kind of started moving into stage 2, which I call the build. But I had to go back and fill this in, which is really part of stage 1. So part of stage 2 is the build, and that is building the light and the color, right? So building the local color in the lights, and part of that also is starting to go ahead and move towards finishing touches right away. So things like the highlights, and the reason why this is part of the build stage is because, this creates form. So we're starting to pull the eye to the middle of the form by establishing a highlight. Even though you might think, yeah, but isn't that a finishing thing? I thought I always heard wait till the end to do the highlight. But the reason why you want to do it now is because it begins to create that illusion of three-dimensionality. And I'm going to pull in a little more yellow ochre. And it's kind of better to put your highlight on maybe a little too thick, wet into wet. And then as you start to build more light and kind of more distinct brushwork and more textures, perhaps, like what I'm doing now, just little bits of textures here and there, you can actually make that highlight a lot smaller. But if you started off kind of too singy, then you're kind of missing out on having some paint to work with and make things happen, more easily, letting the paint do more of the work for you. So once you have some of the basic local color, now you have the extreme amount of light and you have form. You're creating form now. Then you can start to get into some of the finishing things or more details of the object. If there are, more changes, like this actually has a pattern on it. So there's a little bit of shadow here. So I'm adding more of that phthalo blue and burnt umber for some of the pattern in the center. That's also going to create more form there as well. And since this object has some terracotta showing through, I'm going to pull in a little bit of burnt sienna. This beautiful old stone, it's got little pieces of some of that stone showing through, and I'm barely even touching my surface with this brush. And I'm being mindful to keep my brush parallel to the surface so that I'm not making mud or lifting too much of that paint underneath. It is a lot to think about, brush control and how you're loading paint on a brush and then how you're applying paint. The only thing I can tell you is stay patient. You will get there, and you'll naturally start to, understand which way to angle your brush as you're painting to create a certain edge or a certain bit of contrast. Like right now, I'm basically just building some of that light around that top edge to create the separation between this vertical shadow plane and the top of the jar, right? And we do that with color and with paint. We don't do it with line. Okay. And I think this little shadow in here can just have a little more depth a little more contrast. I'm going a little bit darker there. That is a ridge in the vessel. And it's maybe not such a great idea that I'm working this base without building up the roses right away, but I kind of see in my mind where this is all going or will go, so I'm not worried about it. But you'll hear the advice a lot as a beginner to try not to do that, and for good reason too. It's not for no reason, but it's because when you're a beginner, or you're not kind of to that more masterful level yet, part of your journey is relating things to each other successfully, and not kind of just focusing on one thing. And after you do that long enough, then you kind of know how things are going to relate to each other, basically, because you've done it so many times. Okay, but speaking of those pink roses, let's definitely get into those. I need more of my Cab Red light. Part of the reason why I'm using this other brush is because when I went to the supply closet to grab brushes, I didn't grab a small enough one. So, so I'm using this number 4 soft hair, mostly because it comes to a point. This is their cat's tongue brush. So I can kind of get I just didn't want to stop and go back to the closet again. Okay, so I'm going to start with some Cab Red light and titanium, which is going to give us a really nice, pretty pink. Very simple pink. And I noticed, though, this pink, there's like a little touch of warmth to it in the rose, which I like. So I'm going to put a little bit of Naples yellow in there as well. Now, when I lay on these lights, when you lay on your lights, you really do want to lay them on. You want contrast in your paint quality when you're oil painting. You want thicker paint in the lights and thinner paint in the shadows. This doesn't mean that the paint in your shadow has to be transparent, but you do want this paint quality difference. And thicker paint in the lights is, good, because oil paint tends to dry darker, and the thinner the paint is, the darker it's going to dry. So like this background color that has more medium in it, that's actually going to dry a bit darker than what it looks like wet, because it's thinner. Okay, so using more white in your lights here on these roses, especially if you want them to really be lit up, and thicker paint, more white, thicker paint, is going to make it to where whenever they dry, they still look really nice and lit, and the physical light hitting the canvas can't pass through it. So it's different than watercolor, if you've ever painted in watercolor, because with watercolor, you're using the white of the paper to try to get your lights. Okay, so the thinner, less dark color you can use, the more lit up something will look in watercolor, because it's the white of the paper showing through that is making something look lighted. Opposite of oil paint, right? So we don't want this kind of umber showing through in our lights, or else it won't look really lit up. So the other bonus to building up more paint quality is, again, to create the illusion of three-dimensional form in oil paint. So thicker paint and also more specific shapes. Like, that's why the highlight is so critical on something that has a highlight. It creates a focal point on the inside of the form. All right, so now that I have the light as lit up as I want it to be, obviously I've had to sacrifice a lot of local color in the lights to get that effect of light, that punch of light. Now I can relate the shadow more easily to that. And so I can put more red in it. I'm going to start with some more, I'm mixing right into the same pile though, some more cab red into that and a little bit of burnt umber. You could also grab a little bit of this green, which would neutralize the red. Red and green are opposites. They've got the red, blue, and yellow together, so they cancel each other out. So this shadow doesn't have to be, you know, you don't really want it to be super black and dark and inky. You want to maybe put more color into this shadow to start. It still is overall a light against the dark of the background. And I may need to make my background just a little bit darker around that back edge of that rose. And then in the center of the rose, I've got the face of the rose facing away from the light source, which also kind of makes these a little easier to paint, just FYI. And that's okay. We can let it be easy today. We don't always have to be, you know, really pushing ourselves and challenging ourselves every single time. Sometimes you can paint things in ways that you know are going to be a little easier on you that day. Not everything has to, you know, you don't have to prove yourself every time. There's a time and a place for all of that, right? Sometimes we can just let it be easier because we can. And painting is challenging enough in and of itself. So if you can find those ways to make it simpler on yourself, and go for it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go over to the other roses here. And start to get in some of that shadow color on the inside of the rose. You want to start everything more simply here rather than too complicated right away, right out of the gate, because you want simplistic shapes in your painting. If you have too many broken up shapes, if it gets too, you know, if I start putting a bunch of light into that shadow or too many specific petal shapes or whatnot right away, it could start to break down. So once you establish, it could start to break down the clarity of the shape. Once you establish your shadow shape and your light shape, you establish the overall value and color. Try to hang on to that. Try not to break it up too much, especially on a smaller painting. You know, maybe on a bigger painting, you can, you know, get away with breaking it up a little bit more. So start with small things like, oh, okay, it's a little bit darker in the center, but try to keep it very, I would say, very minimal in terms of the slight change of value or slight change of color, especially with value. You want to be very careful in changing your values too much. Within a shape. Okay, so just trying to get this shadow started. And if you find that you're having a hard time judging your values of your objects, one thing I used to always do would be to take a photo of my setup and turn that photo into black and white and then do the same thing with my painting. Because usually if something was feeling really off about my painting, a lot of times that's what it was that I somehow had misjudged a value. I'm just slowly kind of pulling in some green from my green mixture. It's one reason why I do really enjoy working with complementary color. Is because the two colors, it's almost like they're one color because you can mix them together and they kind of cancel each other out. And I'm really sorry about this video today. I can't see any of the comments now. I'm going to have to get online and figure out what they've done differently so that I can get that handled for next time. I hate it whenever they change stuff. Okay. But I will get on that today so that tomorrow I can see everybody's comments, especially for this week because we're having our monthly live 2-day workshop inside the Art Life School this Thursday and Friday. And the theme is Valentine's treats. So I'm just kind of slowly building things up a little bit at a time here. And sometimes I might lose something by doing that and have to come back in and reestablish it. Like there's a little piece of light here on this edge of that petal there, edge of this petal here. I'm trying to get that sense of that, petal bending back. And some of this glow light passing through this petal, which is so beautiful because I'm sitting on the shadow side. So I'm going to put a little bit of yellow ochre into that one. Transmitted light and reflected light is usually warmer. Let's see, I'm going to get something that's kind of similar to that color. Value over here for the stone on the bottom. And that Naples yellow kind of raised the value a little too much on that. So I'm going to add back in some of the yellow ochre. Yeah, I like that sharper edge there where it meets the shadow edge of the vase. But that value to me is maybe a little bright for down there. And I can look for some darker accents or lighter accents in the shadow. But I would say in general, be careful trying to do too much in your shadows. Once you've got your shadow established, try to kind of leave it be if you can, not do too much modeling in the shadow or detail work in the shadow because it's really going to count more in the light. It's going to make more of an impact if you put more effort, more detail and more effort in the light. I do want to get a little more contrast on this cast shadow underneath and adjacent to this rose because that's going to make that rose, the edge of that rose stand out more. It's also going to adjust my value relationship between the value of the ginger jar and the value of the shadow on that rose. All right. One thing I want to be sure to do, just before I go there, I want to get some of this reflected light on this petal, just kind of curving back here with some of that yellow ochre and with that white and cab red light. There's a little bit of a grayish tone there, which often happens on these petals that are separated on their own. You'll get kind of a cool, sometimes even a blue-green kind of look because petals and leaves have this transparent, translucent quality to them. They're not as transparent as glass, but these petals that break away from the, that body of the rose, they're thin, so kind of like human skin, light can pass through them a bit more. So I'm just trying to get that effect, that light passing through them. And if you're looking for a really great artist to study in art history to help you on your roses, I would look to Franz Mortelmans. He got, especially if you like the effect of light and shadow like I do, he really got such a gorgeous effect of that glow and that light and shadow in his rose paintings. Gorgeous, gorgeous painter. In the third stage, that's really what you feel like you're doing a lot of is, okay, you put this kind of body of paint down for your light, body of paint down for your shadow. And then as I'm, kind of building a bit more detail into that, I just kind of feel like I'm adjusting things or pushing paint around, or even just kind of like, oh, okay, that cast shadow on the rose maybe needs to be a little bit darker, maybe not too red. And sometimes just literally pushing paint over to one direction to, adjust a drawing or to create a different edge. So to me, this whole notion of make one brushstroke and that's that is just kind of nonsensical. Like, oh, just put down the brushstroke and don't touch it. I just don't think that is the only way to paint. It is a way to paint. And if that way works for you and you really understand it, it really makes sense to you, by all means, go for it. But it is certainly not the only way to paint. It is not a rule of painting. Okay, so part of that third stage is definitely some of these finishing touches, right? So we have the stems and the leaves, and I always wait until I feel like my roses are developed enough before I start going into foliage, because a lot of times, your roses are growing as you're working on them, and a lot of times you need less of this kind of added green stuff. A little bit goes a long way, in my opinion, with those. And sometimes I won't even do all of it. I might edit out quite a bit here when it comes to the greens. But obviously we need some greens to make it feel like, oh, these roses aren't just levitating here from outer space. They have something that is supporting them. So I'm going back to that green mixture that I had earlier, and then with the phthalo, the cad lemon, and the cad yellow deep. And then where some greens need to maybe be a little warmer or a little less vivid, green, I can add in some burnt umber. There's also a nice deep green, so I'll do some black, ivory black, and phthalo, and some cad yellow deep for like this darker green, which I think ties in beautifully with the vase and also will kind of help pop out this light on this rose. I'm going to go for some Naples yellow into that mixture, maybe a little cad lemon. For this little bit of eucalyptus, this was actually just left over from another setup I painted last week. And I just kind of liked it there. It was accidental. Sometimes those are those happy accidents, that Bob Ross always talked about. But a lot of that is just kind of trusting your intuition and like, oh, I wouldn't really think to put those things together, maybe to add that piece of eucalyptus in, but color-wise it works, and it also added another little shape. So it also helps the shape balance in the painting. because you definitely want to have a shape variety in your paintings. You know, you want to start with the basics like big, medium, small, but then also you want to have some finer things as well. And even something like a fine stem or even just a little piece of light, for example, like this little edge of light that's hitting on the edge of that. I always forget what these are called. The green bit that is over the bud before the rose opens. It's not coccyx, is it? No, I think that's an anatomical bone. So, wow, this is really coming together. So a lot of times in the beginning, you might feel like, is this going to really even go anywhere? And I have to encourage you to trust the process. You know, this, the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 process really does work. In stage 3, you're looking for more details. Once you get that light and shadow shape built up in stage 2, things like, oh, okay, yeah, I can bring out this little piece of this little fold here, you know, in the petal. It can be things like finishing details, like, oh, maybe make this pattern of on the vase a little, you know, stronger here. Reflected lights are a big part of stage 3 because light moves, right? So you're looking for reflected lights. And for those of you who are in the Art Life School, you know, don't forget that under every lesson, you do have that step-by-step checklist for each of the stages so that if you do forget to look for anything, it's a reminder for you so that you don't forget any to look for anything that's important to get in the painting. But it might be little things in stage 3, like little adding more texture, or maybe there's some broken color, like some of this broken color means color that's not mixed in and that's not necessarily related to the local color. So it's more separate from the local color. But like there's little bits and pieces of this terracotta glaze. And again, I would look for those, the areas to look for those in are going to be in the light shapes. And especially in the center of the object. Okay, I'm going to, another thing towards in stage 3 that I look for is just, you know, out of these 3 roses, which one is really the star of the show? And is it kind of lit up enough? Is it special enough or different enough from the others? And when I was looking at all 3 of them, I thought, this one I can really build more light onto. So I'm adding more of the white and more of the Naples yellow into the mixture. And I can also kind of maybe even grow it a little bit so that there's a little more size variety. And when something is larger than the rest, it naturally stands out from the herd, from the bunch, right? So when you're doing bouquets or like a group of the same flower, you usually want to identify, is there one or two, like if it's a large bouquet, it might be a grouping of them, like a group of 3 flowers that are, you know, standing out a bit from the herd, so to speak. And you want to ask yourself, you know, is that standing out enough? Does it need a little more definition or a little more detail? A little more glow here with some yellow ochre going through that. And then are there any little small pieces of light that I missed in terms of detail on the edge of these petals that are overlapping on the inside? So maybe a little more light there, maybe a little piece of light here. And I see a little bit here. as well, so that we can kind of get some more of those layers of the petals. And I think I can also put a little more light here. So, a lot of creativity is just, and creating is just showing up and doing it. Sometimes we might not feel like we're in the mood to do it until we actually start doing it. And then we find ourselves like, wow, really immersed in it. So I don't know if any of you read the, the Atomic Habits book by James Clear, but one of the hacks or tips he gives in there is like, just show up for 2 minutes, which is really hard for most of us to do because we're like, well, I know I can't do anything in 2 minutes. But I think the reason why that trick is recommended and, probably works a bit better for some things than others. But the reason why is because once we're actually doing the thing, it's like we find that we're not having as much resistance to it. Like once we actually commit to, yeah, I'm going to sit down and paint, even if it's just for 30 minutes, or I'm going to sit down and draw, maybe it's not painting, maybe it's drawing for you. And so we'll find that we just kind of get into it, and that feels good. Okay, so part of stage 3, as I said, was, reflections. And I said in the beginning, I wanted to make this tabletop look more reflective and shiny. So I'm going to start building in some of that pink into that cherry wood tabletop. And then if you want to make that look brighter, bring some darker around it. And obviously if you want to really get, depends on your particular goals. Like if you want to really get good in your painting, obviously you're going to have a high level of persistence and commitment to showing up and intentional practice, things like that. But you can't even get there if you can't just get the paint moving around. I think I can pull out maybe a little bit of detail in the shadow just by lifting some of the paint. Not everything has to be painted. You can actually use the ground to create a detail or a value contrast. Sometimes in stage 3, you're also looking to see like what edges maybe need to be more crisp or defined against the background, or especially against background or against the overlapping edge. The opposite is true too. If you have too many sharp edges everywhere, you're going to have to look to see where you can soften some edges and let some edges kind of open up into one another. Actually, I kind of like even this little, again, this is totally accidental from another painting I did Friday, but this little baby's breath that's down here is kind of nice. Okay. I'm thinking I can, if I bring a little more, maybe, well, let's see. Maybe go a little bit darker over there. Before I do that though, I still didn't get my tabletop. I gotta get off that soft brush so I can actually get some paint down. So I'm back to my hog hair brush. So I can get some paint down. I'm doing some alizarin, some burnt sienna, some ivory black. Beautiful. I just think this can be darker over here on this side because it was kind of all the same value, and this will also help my reflective light. Now I'm very, very gently just kind of going over this, letting those brush hairs just tickle the top of that stroke I put down earlier, so that it just creates a blend without totally blending them into one another. This kind of creates a little texture too, which is fun. Usually your reflections are brighter further away from the object on that tabletop plane, so also kind of going a little bit darker towards the base where the cast shadow is. Okay. Part of painting too is knowing when to say, this is good enough, you know? Hashtag good is, hashtag done is better than perfect, right? So sometimes, once you know that you've got your idea there, or where as far along as you want it to be, and you get to decide that, of course. But sometimes it's a matter of just like walking away, letting it be, letting that idea run its course. I like that little bit of pink in there, just for a little fun, playful temperature contrast and broken color. Letting that idea be what it's going to be. Some ideas maybe want to be a little more complex. Others are like, yep, this is it was a simple little setup, sweet, beautiful, innocent little moment of life. And sometimes the longer maybe you fuss with it, the worse it gets. So knowing when to celebrate your wins, celebrate your efforts, and just appreciate, have some gratitude for that subject matter, even appreciation for these beautiful pink roses being here today, inspiring me, bringing color and delicacy and even their beautiful fragrance into my life. Today it's pretty amazing, actually. Like watching a sunrise or a sunset, or being in awe of a little baby or puppy dog, and then again, if you have a bad habit of minimizing what you did, try to break that habit. We're saying, oh, that's not good enough. It's not a masterpiece. Every time we talk to ourselves like that, it kills our creativity. I mean, literally, it's like you're murdering it. So stop it. Stop doing that. We all have to stop doing that and start building the muscle and habit of, celebrating just showing up. Even if it went to crap on you, just celebrate the fact that you showed up today, that you made something. You don't have to judge it. You don't have to say, yeah, but was it really good? Was it really worth it? Yeah, but Kelly, my paintings don't look like yours. Well, neither did mine 17 years ago. So I know I had to get out of the bad habit of tearing my work down 17 years ago. So that's on your mindset side, and mindset is really the name of the game. So you can focus on all the techniques. You can look for what's the magical brush or the magical paint brand or panel or paint box, but really that's not really what a lot of people are missing. It's the inner game, energy, the energy from which you create, basically, is what one mentor is always saying to me. So, your inside determines your outside, your outer results. So just keep that in mind. And that is something that you can work on and practice on and get better at. I just like to sign this with the back of my brush. Still feeling like this, could be a little more softened here, unified, more into one shape before I step away from it. Some people, you might also have the bad habit of stopping too soon. So we all know ourselves, do you stop short, or do you choke the life out of something, or have you developed a good moderation with that? Like, okay, neither one. I really feel like I've got a good balance there after all these years of, really definitely giving it its due, giving it my all, and also not trying to force it to become something that it's not, or some sort of masterpiece, letting that painting be what it's going to be that day. And they're all perfect and they're all beautiful. Okay. And so are yours, by the way, even if you don't think so. Okay, everybody, this has been my painting for the day. I already feel my heart just like so overflowing with love, love for all of you. I hope this has been helpful, and love for the paint and love for color and light. I will take a photo of this, of course, and share it. Let me see if I can raise this up a bit just for now. If you want to take a screenshot at all of that, tilt it forward a bit to get the glare off. But I will take a photo and share it in the comments right after I push end on this video. Thank you all so much for being here. I will also check for any questions or comments, because every time I turned around, there was nothing on the Facebook comments. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I'll figure that out today in time for tomorrow's live and in time for this week's live workshop inside the Art Life School. All right, everybody, sending you all so much love. Wishing you happy painting. Bye for now.